Anubhav. Hi, Anubhav. How are you?
Hi, good morning, and
Good
thank you for the
morning.
questions.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor for us to have you here, and thank you so much for your time. We are looking forward to have a great session from you.
Thank you. Can I share my screen
Yes, sure.
and short presentation?
Okay. I
Is it
can.
visible?
Yeah, I can perfectly see it. So good luck. Stage is all yours now.
Thank you, Anna. So good morning, everyone, and probably afternoon, depending on where you are located. I'm Anubhav Kapoor, and I'm based out of India, and I head the legal operations for Ford and its entities in India. Interesting times, and today we will be discussing in the next 30 minutes in terms of uh, the illicit trade and the counterfeit products. And in the recent times, um, after the post-pandemic and the new normal, how's the risk posing to us, and whether uh, any there are indications post the pandemic era in terms of how this entire area is faring for us. So going by the numbers, uh, uh, it seems that the illicit trade accounts for almost 2.2 trillion, equivalent of 3% of the global GDP, which is quite large, right? In spite of all the technological advances and the regulatory systems and also the agencies collaborating, I think the leakages that happen due to illicit trade are quite huge and formidable. And out of this, if you see, the biggest chunk of it comes from counterfeiting activities, which could basically in the area of counterfeiting of products. And what the study also says, that post the COVID or the pandemic, the illicit trade activities have increased over a multitude of industries. So I think the issue is real, and also there are other factors which kind of make this topic extremely important, and something that uh, brands or companies which want to protect or manage their brands and products and their reputation need to take it seriously, given the new environment. So what is that, what is that as corporates that we can do or indulge so that we can protect our brands better? I think given the scale at which this entire counterfeiting activities are being now carried out, I think we'll get into a little more detail as we go through the case studies and examples. But overall, I think the seriousness at which these activities are being carried on are quite huge, and something that uh, definitely requires attention of the risk experts and the senior management. But before we get into how do we manage this and what techniques and strategies do we deploy, let me reflect a bit in terms of what's happening and the root causes of why this has become so rampant, and the size has increased. I think the three factors which have really contributed to the entire illicit trade or counterfeiting of products is in fact the technology itself, which has played a big role. Now, given that we are in an era of 3D printing, and copying technologies have become extremely sophisticated, so the counterfeiters are also finding it easy to duplicate or copy products, and the boon itself has become the bane in many technologies or many products, where Some of these are being used quite extensively. So I think that's the first factor that is contributing to it. Of course, the internet connectivity and the wide reach of e-commerce that has happened in the recent times, especially during the pandemic, where more and more people switched on to e-commerce and electronic ways of shopping and buying and selling things. This entire area has become much more vulnerable, and it has led to also a rapid increase of counterfeit products around the world. And to just give you a number or the scale at which this e-commerce is, at one of the latest surveys said 60% of the global retail sales are now on e-commerce platform, which are quite a bit. And not only given this increased size of the market and the platform in which the people are buying and selling things, there have been a lot of regulatory reforms as well across the world in the area of e-commerce and cybersecurity that different countries have seen over the past few years. And it is not one sector that is getting affected. I think this entire counterfeiting is affecting several industries, including fashion, health, beauty, electronics, automobiles, and so on and so forth. And obviously, as you're all aware, any fake products damages the brand and reputation and of the company, but it also kind of erodes the trust of the customers, and which I think is much more damaging, because once the trust is gone, it is very difficult to acquire the customers again, and the consume and leave alone the health and safety hazards that this produces or exposes our consumers to. So obviously, I think the companies are extremely sensitive in every sector in terms of how do we manage these risks and the measures that we need to take um, uh, to reduce that. So, however, there are few challenges that have been created by technology, internet connectivity, and e-commerce. One is that the sheer reach of these platforms. These platforms have provided marketplaces which are global in nature. You can advertise your products not on several social media sites, several marketplace sites, several online platforms at the same time, and it can reach millions and millions of people, and which has actually escalated or exponentially increased the size of the problem, which probably, say, in an era which where predominantly it was more physical trade, this was more concentrated or not crossing the physical boundaries of the nations or the countries. And that is where another problem comes, or challenge comes, because IP, while it is international in scope and intellectual, you can protect your intellectual property and take various measures. But now, given the size of the territorial expanse of the entire activity, it becomes extremely difficult to contain it or do it at a scale which is small, and because any such efforts will be relevant to the entire size of the problem. And many of the laws, they are, while the countries are upping their game by bringing in new legislations and new rules which can manage the e-commerce platforms and bring control the cyber security, but every country has its own laws and enforcement regimes. So navigating through them obviously is a challenge, and it has its own nuances as we navigate through it. So I think all in all, the crime has become global in nature, while on the legal side, as corporates, we are still defending it at a country to country level, or at a very local level. So I think the change in perspective in terms of how do we manage or fight against these counterfeit activities also requires a mindset change. I think with that context, let me divide the entire challenge into, or strategies into three main pillars. The first is the regulatory framework. I think the second is the technologies in which we can use to manage counterfeiting or protect our products from counterfeiting. And the third is basically the strategies of counterfeiting, and probably it requires a 360-degree mindset to defend our brands, and it is no longer only focused on legal enforcement or legal laws. To start with, I think on the regulatory framework, I've given, it is no longer restricted to intellectual property laws that you protect your trademark, you patent your products. That should kind of manage your counterfeiting. While I think those are the first things that have to be done in case you want to enforce your rights against your trademarks and copyrights and patents. But it is no longer enough that you just look at that to manage your brands and products, because I think the platforms on which these products are being sold have also become important and are associated with different regulatory regimes. So in any country, if you want to kind of manage the brand against counterfeiting or illicit trade, I think you have to not only look into the IP and anti-counterfeiting laws, but also have a good knowledge or navigate through the e-commerce regulations, because e-commerce regulations help you understand what are the rights of the people who can advertise or sell products on those platforms. Can you kind of, if there is a counterfeit product that is being sold on a platform, as a company, how can you remove that product or delist that product? I think those are the issues that basically come under the e-commerce regulations, and so and so forth, and what are the rights of the platforms, whether the platforms that are hosting these counterfeit products liable for anything, because at the end of it, they are simply the platforms. It's the people who are different players or stakeholders who are hosting the product for sale. And can the platforms should do a minimum due diligence? I think the shade of regulations across various countries are different. And I think a good understanding of e-commerce regulations definitely is now an important part of understanding or countering, managing your anti-counterfeiting strategy. Similarly, the data protection laws form a very important part of the anti-counterfeiting strategy, because because there are a lot of information which relates to personal information of your consumers. Where can it be hosted? What are the liabilities that one attracts to kind of host your servers in different countries? What are the local laws related to transfer of information related to consumers? Because suppose if the consumer information gets hacked or your servers get hacked, and you are in a country which is not friendly on the data protection, or then probably you can attract huge liabilities related to that. And though it is directly not linked to counterfeiting, but indirectly this is the important part, because nowadays on the dark web, these are the consumer databases that are being sold, and the counterfeiters kind of use these databases of your consumers to reach out with duplicate products as well. And this has become a constant menace across the globe. And therefore, I think indirectly or directly, I think these are important laws that one has to delve into while dealing with anti-counterfeiting activities as well. The next is the cybersecurity framework. If you are in a country with a strong cybersecurity framework, you have specific cells which deal with cyber crimes and a framework across which protects the cybersecurity. You will be lucky, because many countries are still in the process of developing these frameworks and getting the organizations who can manage cyber crimes still in place. And For example, in India, we still don't have a national framework, but it is part of the local police. We have special cybercrime cells which manage it. But I think there is a long way to go, given the sophistication in which these hackers and counterfeiters are using technology. I think the speed at which the law enforcement is catching up, I think definitely deserves more attention. Similarly, the consumer protection laws are there because sometimes unfair trade practices are within the purview of the consumer protection laws. And if you have products which are being exported across the globe, then obviously there are special provisions under the custom and trade laws as well, where you can educate your custom officers or take some actions which can prevent counterfeit products to move across the borders and be confiscated at the port of landing. So I think at a very high level, these are some of the important laws that one should have an understanding if they want to manage a full strategy around anti-counterfeiting and reduce the illicit trade related to their company or product. And all these, many of these legislations are recent, right? Many countries are coming out with has come out with regulations only recently, and the enforcement framework is still being developed, and therefore that adds to the challenge of it. But if as well, and given that this is in the technology area, things are also moving at a fast pace, and probably the regulation is lagging a bit behind, given that counterfeiters now find new ways and they are thinking faster than the law sometimes, right? So I think, but overall, these 6 or 7 categories of frameworks are important. A understanding of it is important if you really want to have a holistic view in terms of or a strategy around anti-counterfeiting. The next is in terms of the technologies. There are various technologies that are now there, which were not there earlier, which we can use for anti-counterfeiting activities. We can use visual authentication technologies, overt and covert security features, like temper. We can use packaging, which is tamper-proof. Each product can have a unique identification, which allows the product to be tracked back to its point of manufacture. That is the trace and track technologies. We have different holographic technologies. We can have special printing, which is visible in different lights. If your products are online or softwares, there are different techniques of data management or hashtagging that can be used to prevent duplicate or counterfeit products. Depending on the industry and the product that you are dealing with, I think a number of technologies have emerged in the last few years, which can be used to counter the menace of illicit trade. And along with that, I think collaboration across the industry and the supply chain is a very important part, because standalone as a company probably will have very limited means, and in some cases the leakages are also happening at the supply chain or point of sales as well. So you should have mechanisms to kind of manage any leakages which may have happened at that point of time. So there are technologies where at the point of sale itself, every product can be verified based on permission and can be sold or tracked. These are a bit expensive, but that kind of ensures a full assurance that whatever is being sold to the customers are original and not counterfeit. And lastly, I think educating the local customs officials is important, because if in international trade, I think the port of landings and where the goods are crossing the national borders, those become important points to manage, and collaboration with the local customs law officials along with the maturity of the local custom laws become very important to manage such incidents. Some of the technologies that are there could range from electronic technologies to marking technologies. You can have encrypted images, watermarks, rainbow printings, or different UV, IR, or infrared sensitive inks. You can print holograms in different ways. Barcoding is another one, so and so forth. In addition, if your products are more, say, complex, you can have different chemical and physical technologies, even mechanical technologies. Now the latest is basically based on shared ledger technologies, or blockchain technologies are also now being used for anti-counterfeiting defenses. And as covered by the last speaker, there are also global standards and local standards which you can use to choose the best ways where you can authenticate your products or establish and monitor brands and establish security. So these are the array of different techniques depending on the industry and the products you are dealing with. You can choose among different technologies where you can which can help you protect your product from anti-counterfeiting. Of course, whatever you choose, the cost and the complexity will vary based on the solution that you have chosen. But I think more than the cost, I think the more important factor is the effectiveness in which you can control the anti-counterfeiting activities. The last leg, or the third leg, is basically how does this all come together in terms of specific enforcement techniques, which may kind of include social media and customer feedbacks. It is very important that the company monitors the social media and the customer feedback, because many of the leads that come in terms of anti-counterfeiting basically arise from there. Supply chain is another. I've already discussed about this. Increasing the awareness and communication definitely helps both among the customers and the supply chain and the partners, because more the transparency you have and the traceability you have, the more effective your program will be. Data centers and cloud locations are another important areas, because if your servers are located in a country which has less regulatory regimes around counterfeiting, that may cause issues as well. And also the local and the international collaborations. It is important that companies collaborate and come together to fight against the counterfeiting. There is no one strategy that kind of can be used. It is a mix and match of different strategies and tactics that needs to be deployed in a more proactive manner by the companies which can manage these. And therefore, given the dynamic nature of the whole issue, and given that the counterfeiters are now thinking much faster or ahead, I think it is important that the companies should also think like counterfeiters and start thinking proactively in terms of how to take counterfeit detection measures, collaborate with the government and the bodies, because without participation of the companies, and I think their efforts will never be a fruit. And at the end of it, I think what really helps is awareness among the customers and the stakeholders, and of course not patronizing fake goods is another traditional way in which we can manage counterfeiting. So all in all, I think the mantra right now is that in case you have to fight against the illicit goods, there is a lot of avenues that we can use, but it has to be a global monitoring program with continuous engagement, given the reach of the internet and the e-commerce platform, with proactive actions, and that create visibility, traceability, and transparency across all stakeholders. I think it's a collective sport and has to be done together. I think companies should not mind collaborating with each other if it is a fight against the counterfeiters. I think with that, I conclude. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Hi, Anubhav. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So, Anubhav, thank you so much for your wonderful session. And it was really very interesting. I personally enjoyed your session. And I'll ask the audience that if they're having any question, they can drop us in the chat or in the QA session. And Anubhav is here to answer all of our questions. Okay. Thank you so much, Anubhav.
Thank you.
Have
Thank
a
you,
great day.
everyone.
Stay safe.